Gute, izina ryanje ni Bukuru Anastazie.
This is Bukuru Anastazie. The story of her coming to America as a refugee is powerful. It has been over 8 years since she immigrated. To this day, she still reflects on her journey.
The reason why we came here in the United States was because there was a lot of war happening in the region where we were at. And also, my mom had been in the Rwanda genocide. The Rwanda genocide had her name on the list of people who needed to be, searched because they suspected them to be involved with the genocide. And they found out that she wasn't. So, as a result, they sent us here because they were afraid that government was going to go after my family if we stayed.
James Benzoni, attorney at Benzoni Law Office, PLC, is a long-term advocate for immigrants. His experience with the refugee community parallels Bukuru's story.
The United Nations is who decides as refugees. So the United Nations High Commissioner on Refugees, and they run all the refugee camps in the world. I mean, it's pretty amazing. Over 10 million refugees in camps, and they see that they get fed and they get, some kind of housing, like clean water, clothes, just showers and whatever.
There was a village where we lived for probably 8 years old. And then the application process took my mom about a year, maybe 2 years before she was picked for an interview with the UN and UNICEF. After that, we were transported to a refugee camp where we stayed for about 8 months. And after 8 months, my mom had to do the interviews all over again. And then we came here.
Some refugee camps can be very primitive because they're very close to war zones. And others, like in Kenya, they've got refugee camps, people that have been there for 10 years and longer, so they're kind of a town by themselves.
The camp was really fun, actually. It was more like the village where I lived, except that the areas that we were put to live at that moment, we didn't own those areas. In those camps, we were given English training where we would learn English. I wouldn't say it wasn't the best because we didn't get government funded food or anything. We had to go out into it was kind of like a forest, to be honest. So we had to go out and fetch, get the food ourselves in order to feed ourselves. Before we came here, I guess we went on a car, and that was my first time. First time on a car. I was so scared. At the airport, it was a lot of African people, so I really didn't meet anyone of a different race until I was, I believe, in South Africa. That's where we went. So during the plane ride, all of us, it was literally our first time, so we really didn't know what to expect. It was kind of scary because there was this myth that once you're on a plane, you're going to go into the Red Ocean where people die. And I guess that kind of goes through slavery. That's the one way that we can connect to that.
This new experience did not stop at cars and airplanes. Things as small as light switches and stoves were new to her as well.
It was totally different. I didn't know how to work the things that now that I know how to work. I didn't know how to use the showers. I didn't know how to use the stove, the oven, turning on the lights on and off. That was really weird for me. One of the most interesting aspects of it was that they had all of the main rooms in just one house. I lived in a village where the restroom had its own little house. Mm-hmm. The kitchen had its own little house. The main house had its own. It was kind of really different just to see everything just put in one area.
Refugees, when they come to the United States, they come through, there's 9 called resettlement organizations that take responsibility for resettling, and they get a certain amount of money from the U.S. government. Not a lot, but some. And so Lutheran refugee resettlement will have, say, Burmese, right? Maybe they get 100 Burmese families and they bring them to Iowa, and they'll maybe put some in Des Moines, maybe some in Iowa City, maybe some in Davenport, wherever. They allocate according to their own resources. And then they'll help the people get an apartment, get them set up for some kind of benefits, short-term. It's a short-term benefits. And maybe help them find work, maybe get them in English as a second language class, that sort of thing. And then the refugees will get assistance for just a few months.
But yeah, we were assigned somebody who spoke the same language as us, and they would help us for the first few months. And as soon as they themselves determined that we were assimilated enough into the United States culture, then they would just kind of leave our side.
In general, within a few years, The refugees, what I find happens is they generally form an enclave of their own people, and they help each other. Some will learn English, some won't. So then a certain number of those people begin to act as translators for the other people in their community.
I would say that is actually very much true, because when I came here, I was able to catch on in English very quickly. But my mom had a very hard time, and still has a very hard time, learning English. But whenever we set up an appointment to go to the hospital, when she went to the bank to make transactions, I would have to accompany her everywhere, literally even to the store, just to make sure that she is heard, because it was easier for her to communicate with the people who don't speak our language through me.
Church is another big one. There's different churches in the Des Moines area that will have, say, a large group of Laotians, right? Like Trinity Lutheran Church, right across from Lutheran Social Services. They've got a large group of people from Laos that go there. I don't even know if they're Lutheran or not, but they go to the Lutheran church, and they have services there. Different churches will provide a place for worship, a place for community meetings.
There's actually 3 different churches where Burundians, Rwandese, and Tanzanians can all just come together and praise God, because they all kind of speak the same languages and they understand one another, because we get to connect with people who have experienced the same things as us, assist one another in assimilating into the American culture, and also maintaining our own culture as well.
The children all go to school here, right? So the children all learn English. When the children learn English, and so what happens then, there can be a disconnect between the parents and the children, because the parents are still from the old country, but the children become Americanized. Because the one thing that America does do is it washes away everybody's culture. I mean, after a while, everybody's wearing jeans that are distressed, right? Whereas in the old country, nobody wears jeans that are distressed. Why? Because getting a good pair of jeans is precious. Here, people pay extra money for jeans with holes in them. I mean, that's crazy, right? I mean, when you think about it, it's insane.
I actually did have a discussion with my mom about this, and she felt like the American culture was more of a threat to our culture, because we came here so young and we're going to grow up in this American culture. So she's scared that we're going to adopt more of the American culture instead of our African traditions and ways of life. But she made it very clear that every day throughout her life, she will make sure that we understand our own culture and we're able to come back home, for example, eat our traditional dishes instead of eating American food, and talk in our language instead of talking in English, and making sure that we just talk to one another about our cultures. What I have noticed is that a lot of African kids, once they come here, they are more prone to adapt to the American culture and try to wash away their African cultures in order to be accepted in the American society, which is kind of bad at the same time, because it kind of tells their parents hey, I don't really want to accept that part of you that you've given me. I want to accept this stranger's part that they've given me. It's kind of a really weird dynamic. I make it a point to always eat African food and speak my language whenever I can, and do extensive research on my country, because I'm not there, so I don't really know what's going on. I don't know I didn't grow up there, so I don't fully know the traditions and the way of life that, for example, a Rwandese person is supposed to carry themselves. So I always make it a point to make sure that I research and do more background on that, just to make sure that I stay informed and also utilize that in my daily life.
Here's what people don't realize, is that we're the ones that are lost, not them. We've lost our way. Otherwise, we wouldn't be worried about making America great again. We'd know it's already great. It's the greatest country the world's ever seen. I just see the ongoing flow of immigrants, and especially refugees from different cultures, just makes America so very rich.
For people who've never experienced being refugees, to make sure that you make it a very important point to help the refugees assimilate into the American society, but also make it possible for them to keep their cultures of wherever they're from so they can feel comfortable to be themselves.